Welcome back to our Peace Through Strength podcast, brought to you by the American Security Council Foundation. I am your host, Joy Votrobek, and back with me is returning guest, Dr. Paris Michaels. Welcome back, Paris.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thank you. Dr. Paris Michaels has his PhD from the Institute of World Politics, and he focuses his studies on the Eastern Mediterranean. He was with us back in July as we discussed Turkey and NATO, and today we are going to have an update on Turkey from the Israeli war to the F-16 deal and Sweden, as well as Northern Cyprus. Paris, the Israeli war has brought the Middle East front and center once again. But while the world is focusing on Gaza, Erdogan, Turkey's president, continues the fight for recognition of Northern Cyprus by the EU and the UN. Paris, could you give us a brief on Turkey's claim to Northern Cyprus?
Well, Turkey has a claim on Northern Cyprus. However, Turkey's the only one that acknowledges that they have that claim. They're not acknowledged. The territory is not acknowledged by the United Nations, the EU, or anyone else. There may be one or two little terrorist organizations who do acknowledge it, because there probably are some training camps there and places where we learn how to do drone work and things of that nature, which it's a rather remote place, the end of that island, and it's good for training for sea operations as well, and the Turkish Navy has operations there often. So the island is split culturally, politically. I'd say 2/3 of it maybe is Greek, the southern 2/3, and the upper third is of Turkish domain. Okay, and I won't go over the whole story of how that came to be, but later on in the talk today we'll get to see how some of the conditions are again present that might procreate another opportunity for Erdogan to take the rest of the island. But we'll talk about that as we move on.
Well, that was another question I had. If you think this is a little push for him to further expand Turkey in the Middle East.
Well, as we know, President Erdogan is on an expansionist campaign. He'd like to reclaim some of the territories that Kemal Ataturk gave up as a result of World War I. Much of this territory was held by the Italians and some other countries, but the Turks probably had the best control of it as a result of the Ottoman Empire being the dominant governance in the area for the last 5 or 6 centuries after or prior to World War I. So, when you have ownership of a territory or a land, it's very hard to get back once you lose it. Unfortunately, their sacred hero, Kemal Ataturk, saw it fit to surrender that land because it was very difficult to manage. Okay, many of these islands are maybe 5 miles wide. No one lives on them. They don't have fresh water, and it was out of his span of control to maintain them. So he said, let them be somebody else's headache. So that somebody else ended up being Greece for most of it. Now, all this wasn't just Greece's land grab. It was all part of the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire after World War I. There are many organizations worldwide who had a say in how this would go. But in the end, Turkey pretty much coalesced with the whole deal, and they said, that's okay, we'll handle it like that. So that's how the area, the island of Cyprus and many of those islands, became Greek property, even though they had a long history of other properties. And it can be said it's one time or another, maybe it was literally Turkish, but now they want it back for sure, and they want it on their maps. That's all Turkish territory. So if you look on most Fedor maps or some travel maps, you have to buy 2 maps because one end doesn't have anything to do with the other end. So you very seldom see the road maps laid out to serve both ends of the island. Yeah. Well, and even the cities' names, on a Turkish map, they're all in Turkish, and on a Greek map, they're all in Greek, and not to the recent names, but to the ancient names. So this gets rather involved, all the way to the Phoenician and the Venetian civilizations.
Oh, wow.
So it's quite a story. But as it is right now, there's a green line dividing the island. It's maintained by over 1,000 UN troops. you have your skirmishes, your border skirmishes, and so forth. But generally, there are not that many hostilities being experienced at this time. There is some terrorist action going on back and forth. You know, somebody blows up a building and they accuse the other side and so forth. But
as we're seeing in Israel and Gaza.
Yeah, well, you know, again, once it's territory. Once you own it, it's hard to give up, and you'll always want it back. So, you know, you really have to make sure your priorities are set and your plans are made for how you're going to dispense of these properties after a war. So
Erdogan's pushing the UN and EU to recognize.
Well, there's a little bit of a theory there. He can't get the UN to recognize his part of the island. So what if all of a sudden that island became all his, where the rest of the island is already approved and recognized by the UN? So why shouldn't it be approved now that he owns it? So it's kind of a land grab. And all the situation as it stands right now, you have a replay of 1974. You know, we lost a president and went to an impeachment situation. We have a weak president here now. We have a very big conflict in Israel that was going on at the time. So all the eyes of the world are on Israel. We have the Ukraine issue, conflict going on. So it's really one of these opportunities where if you were going to do it, probably now would be the time or someplace close. Now, I asked many Greeks about this. I'm Greek. They kind of laugh at the idea and they said Turkey wouldn't dare. But then there are those who say he's just the guy to do it and now's the time to do it. So maybe we'll see some action there as well. The United States can't be on many more fronts than we already are.
I agree there.
We're getting exhausted. Our resources are being exhausted.
And you brought up a good point, because that's why I was asking about if you believe this is a push for him to further expand Turkey into the Middle East, because after hearing that impassioned speech after Hamas attacked Israel, it really seemed as if he wanted to push further expansion of Turkey.
Yeah, he more than doubled down on all his campaign claims, which was earlier this year. And he sees this, that's the way he manages his campaigns, and that's how he manages his people. And the Turks like a strong leader. You know, most people do, actually, most countries do, but they really like a strong leader. So this gives him some bravado, and it doesn't seem that there's that many people or countries that could stand against him right now or willing to. He does commerce with many European countries, but that lost commerce is now being consumed by Russia. So he does more work with Russia and China right now, and he does a lot to suit them and please them, and he gives them big ticket contracts of projects to do, like canals and other things. So yeah, he's volleying his value in the region, and he's promised his people that he's going to get the Ottoman Empire back for them, and that he will become the caliphate. And in doing this, since October 7th, he's become even more emboldened.
That's what I gathered out of the speech from October 7th as well.
Now, he does a lot of propaganda work. You'll see some television news coverage of thousands of people in the street, and he says that this is his way of showing support for the Palestinians and so forth. But really, it was a march, like a patriotic march for the independence of Turkey, and a couple of other ceremonies rolled into one. So he makes it look like it's all for his campaign and so forth. But if you speak Turkish, I guess you know what the TV is really saying. But you know, the way it's dished out to the news media, it's not always what he says. So, and he's made up quite a bit of a tour since October 7th. He's knocked on just about every European door to see who's in and who's out, and who cares and who doesn't, what kind of deals he can cut. We have an F-16 deal in the works with him. He's made an effort to go to other countries to see if he could buy or he can get their airplanes. He's talking to Spain about another aircraft carrier. And these are things that countries usually come at least to the United States to get a price quote.
Right.
But he's been kicked out of one program, the F-35 program.
For a good reason.
For a good reason.
Yes.
And now he's trying to get back at, the United States, and he'll throw Israel in there in the fold. So he's conquering the world with, one fell swoop.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the F-16 deal, because in recent news, NATO had just told Erdogan that he needed to let Sweden join the alliance. That he's hit, I believe it's only Turkey and Hungary that are holding back Sweden at this point. And we discussed back in July the F-16 deal. So can you update us on where the U.S. stands with the F-16 deal to Turkey in hopes of allowing Sweden into NATO?
Yeah, well, let's back up a little and start with there are 31 countries in NATO, and to vote in another country, it has to be unanimous.
Yes.
All right, so Sweden would be the 32nd country. There's another gentleman called Orban,
Yes.
who's in the mix, another European leader, and he's withholding his vote until President Erdogan donates his. And since really there's two votes going there,
Right.
so they're being left out. Now, I guess about 3 years ago, Turkey approached the United States for a purchase of additional F-16s. And at the time, it didn't really sound like a good deal to most people that were involved. And that was because Erdogan wasn't behaving, okay? And he was aggravating many of his neighbors and so forth. And his behavior was indefensible. He was really building up his bravado for his political campaign, showing his people that he's not going to be bullied around and that he's the bully and so forth. So he did a couple of things, like he buzzes islands a lot, and he went to Libya and claimed to be the victor of both sides of the war there. I don't know how he does that. He takes some Syrians, he turns them into mercenary forces and lends them out. So he got into the Armenian-Azerbaijan affair. He did a pretty good job at brokering his way into a peace deal manager, if you will. He gets points for that at the UN. But really, he looks for opportunities and he seizes upon them. So the F-16 comes along, and I should tell you a little bit about the airplane at first. The F-16 was developed in the 1970s. It was built in the USA by Lockheed Martin. They're designed to be upgradable if you bought the advanced configuration kits. So over time, instead of it being a throwaway jet, you just buy the new kit and you have all new armament and electronics and so forth. It's a versatile, medium weight range jet fighter that can dogfight as well as deliver ordnance in many forms. Now, the latest copy of the F-16 and the best, the one that everybody wants, is the F-16 Viper. Isn't that a cool name? Mm-hmm. It's a newly upgraded model. It has fangs. It's really hot. It boasts a powerful 20-millimeter cannon. It can be equipped to simultaneously carry bombs, rockets, and missiles in varying amounts and quantities. So now you hook all this up with all the electronics that the free world has to offer, not to mention that it can be flown with a single pilot, all right? And you have a very serious platform, okay? Its combat performance range is perfect for the Middle East and the operations that can be conducted there. In other words, no one has to fly for hours to do their mission. Yeah, everybody seems to be within 1,000 miles of each other. Anybody you want to bomb or be bombed by, that's all the further they're coming. If they're not using missiles, cruise missiles, or submarine launch missiles. So it's a single-engine fighter that doesn't drink much gas, has endurance, doesn't have to be airily refueled to conduct its missions. So it's a hot little airplane. 25 countries currently operate 3/4 of all the world's F-16s. The U.S. built it, so it has the largest inventory of F-16s, and that comes to 936 copies. Wow. Turkey, by the way, has the next largest fleet of F-16s, which is 243 aircraft, and that's a respectable size fleet. Israel comes in third with 224 F-16s, and Egypt has 218. South Korea is fifth largest fleet with 167. Oddly enough, Greece, neighbor to the west, has 153 F-16s, and Taiwan has 136 with 66 more on order. Now, you might notice, the last time I was here, I spoke about where the next couple of conflicts might come up, and all these places seem to have F-16, so that's a good airplane. The rest of the fleets that exist in the world are distributed amongst 4 other European countries, all of which are NATO. And at this very moment, there's 16 older models being updated to be flown to the Ukraine. They're going to come from Belgium, Norway, Denmark, and the Netherlands. And they'll be replacing Soviet-era MiGs, which they're currently flying. Coincidentally, the first class of Ukrainian F-16 pilots to complete training graduated a few weeks ago. And they were trained by the U.S. and Danish Air Force instructors in their corresponding countries. It could take 3 to 6 months to teach a pilot how to fly the F-16. Depends how much experience and combat experience he has. It also takes time to teach him how to use the weapon systems. Remember, there's only one pilot, so he has to be operating all the systems at once by himself. So he has to not only know it, but he has to be good at it. And he has to be well practiced. And this usually comes about by the use of simulators. Okay, so there's a lot of simulator training going on. There's a new F-16 training facility going up in Romania right now, and that should be done in a few weeks. And it'll also have training for maintenance as well as the flight personnel. So you put all this together and you see there's an escalation of activity that is creating a demand for the F-16. Seems like that's the bird everybody wants. Nothing bigger, nothing smaller. It's just the right bird.
And you speak very in depth to this. I want to say to our listeners that you are a pilot, airline pilot.
It's
for
a
how
very
many years?
Wow, 45 years.
Okay, so I can understand how.
But I never flew a jet fighter.
No.
So
I have my private license as well, so
well,
I'm also very much interested.
That's commendable. Yeah, so you can appreciate these statistics.
And how many more F-16s are Turkey asking for?
Well, that's a good question. The number bounces around, and there's also another thing that they could buy instead of a new airplane. They could just get a kit. All right, and there's pros and cons to this. You know, you're not buying a whole new airplane, but there's something neat about a new airplane. You know, it's stronger. It says technology. The airplane's 50 years old, really. So, you know, you have new technologies going into it. Epoxy. It's lightweight. You know, all these little things trade off in a new airplane. It's just like buying a new car. So
that brings up a question: is the U.S. prepared to give them the latest F-16?
Well, that's where you know we ran into trouble with the F-35 because it had all the latest weapons, concealment systems, and so forth. And by them having them and buying the Russian missile systems, there was a conflict of interest. You can't have both. You know, you need two different kinds of radar to do each one, and so on and so forth. Sooner or later, you're going to have a technology transfer. So we couldn't chance it.
No, I think we're absolutely right in doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been good if Erdogan said, yeah, I'll be good, you know, I'm not going to share this with anybody. But he didn't even say that. He said, you can't tell me what to do with my airplanes. So that's the attitude that we're working with here. So in October of 2021, Turkey put in the request to buy $20 billion worth of Lockheed Martin F-16s, along with the avionics and weaponry modernization kits for the existing airplanes that they have. Remember, they have the second largest fleet of F-16s in the world. So anything they get is going to be used. You know, you have parts that you can reuse again. You're talking about a streamlined inventory for maintenance systems. This is, you know, when you have a big fleet, this is how you do it. You keep a little bit of everything laying around, so if you get caught in combat and you break something, you can fix it. Now, when the offer came to buy them, NATO was a little dubious because of his expansionist behavior. It didn't seem like a good idea, but right now, the deal even looks worse.
Yes, I was going to bring that up too.
So what he did to get leverage was clever. Erdogan became increasingly friendly with U.S. adversaries. He rendered contracts to large-scale projects like the Ataturk Canal, which is going to parallel the Suez. The Bosphorus and Dardanelles Canal from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. Yes. So by doing that, he gets out of the Montreux Convention. He doesn't have to guard it from Russian subs or anything. This is his canal. He could run it the way he wants. And actually, he'll make a better canal because it'll be bigger. It can accommodate aircraft carriers and so forth, where these vessels have a hard time getting through the natural straits that they have to use now, which he's in charge of guarding but doesn't. So at the time this order came through, he's also liberally installing himself in contrived diplomatic roles with the UN to bring peace to places like Libya while he was finishing off the Kurds and the Armenians elsewhere. But as we know, diplomacy is a dynamic science. It's often influenced by vacuums of power, and we talked about this earlier.
Yes.
The opportunities resulting from varying strengths of authority by global actors and other events on the world stage really dictate how this is going to go. So the U.S. is not adept at conveying clear policy communications to the Middle East. I often use the example of when you're talking to somebody who is speaking a language or knows a language other than yours, and they pretend that they understand or they don't understand. There's a reason for, they'll smile or they'll look away or they'll ignore or acknowledge you and so forth. And this is what we have going on with our Middle Eastern neighbors right now. So we have a communication problem. We could be better at it. We have dozens of departments and administrational organizations within the government to handle it, but it seems like nothing's working right now. And this was evidenced by Tony Blinken stopping by to talk to several of our Middle Eastern neighbors over the last month, seeing what he could do to help mitigate the Ukraine crisis somewhat. But when he got to Turkey, and he wanted to talk a little bit about the F-16 deals, and he didn't get to talk to Erdogan. Maybe it wasn't planned to be an Erdogan meet because it was last minute, but he did talk to his foreign minister, who's
Yes, I did. I read that, but he did not talk with Erdogan.
yeah, and he didn't stay very long.
No,
So
no.
after all was said and done, Mr. Blinken got back in the Air Force One airplane and headed back to the United States. And mid-flight, he gets a message that Erdogan has announced that he's never ever going to talk to Netanyahu again. And so that kind of implies that nothing really got accomplished here, that didn't go well. So I don't know how, we're not privy to everything that goes on behind the scenes. There's back channels and other deals that could be made and so forth. But that kind of put the ice on the F-16 deal for now. Within a matter of days, Erdogan was back on his way on the road again, seeing who else he could talk to find fighter jets and that kind of thing. So he's not sitting still. And in fact, he retorts with a threat to the United States that since he sold the F-35s to Greece, maybe this Turkish deal with the F-16 is not going to go on. So how's that for, tit for tat?
Well, and maybe it shouldn't, because I was going to say, in light of Erdogan's stance on Israel, in your opinion, should the U.S. even reconsider this F-16 deal?
Well, there was a day and time and administrations and so forth that would have been taken for granted, but it's not the way it is now.
No.
Our president seems hell-bent on giving the nuclear arms back to Iran. Iran is running some good strings of operations with Hamas and Hezbollah and a couple others.
We'll get to that.
And the Houthis.
Yep.
So, it's a dangerous situation right now. And again, I don't have all the information. I'm not privy to all the information. But from the outside looking in, it's kind of like I have to analyze it with what I don't know and what I might know. So that's where the F-16 deal sits right now.
So it's just coal at the moment. I mean, he's not getting him from us. It doesn't look like he's getting him from any of the other.
Well, he's not saying he's going to vote. He won't vote for the Swedish thing, and
Yes.
we it's a stalemate. And he keeps the deal keeps getting sweeter and sweeter. Canada lifted its restrictions on his weapons ban. A couple other countries did things to make it more salient for him to vote for the Swedish accession into NATO, but he won't bite. See, he figures I'm going to get my way or no way. And so far it's working, but the time has passed where it looks like the vote's going to be available for him to make, and everybody's just going to throw in the towel, and we're going to do it without him. So either they're going to let Sweden in, which would be against the laws. They have to change the law, the charter, or it's time to start talking about, is Turkey really in NATO or not? Which brings us back to
before.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. So you see. He's a skilled, artful dodger in getting his way, and he's done it well. He's done it well.
Well, and we know that he condemned Israel's actions against the Palestinians in Gaza, and he has not kicked out the Muslim Brotherhood or Hamas from Turkey. And recently in the news, and you brought this to my attention too, a top Muslim Brotherhood operative from Yemen, I might add, intensified a lobbying campaign in Turkey for Hamas. So, Paris, why is the Muslim Brotherhood lobbying for Hamas?
Okay, well, now we have to get into the history of the Muslim Brotherhood and the history of Hamas. Well, first of all, this fellow from Yemen, he has 5 or 6 big industries in Turkey. So right there's an incentive for him to guard his interests, right? As a bonus, though, he gains political favor with Erdogan by kind of running a marketing propaganda campaign for Hamas and the other organizations, which I won't start to mention, but there's others who really collectively come together in one of these, the friend of my enemy is my friend, that kind of thing. And did I say that right?
Enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Yeah.
It's what our senior analyst speaks about all the time.
I'm analyzing so many sides at once. No, that's right. So that's how that fits in. And he's not the only one, and there's others. And Erdogan is lining up his ducks for political support internally, and this is how he does it. He shows his people that he's got he's savvy to international commerce, and he's doing commerce with other countries and so forth, and he doesn't have to lick our boots. This is the way he put it. So that's what's going on there. Now the Israeli thing, we're just digging deeper and deeper into Erdogan's blacklist. Okay, because I think in the end we're going to very heavily support Israel, and not the end, but even now. There's just a couple of things, like we want to get these hostages back, and there's other priorities that are appropriate at this stage. But as we see, the ceasefire just ended. Now the bet becomes: will there be more ceasefires? Or is he just going to go? Is Netanyahu going to go in and make that place a glass parking lot, as he's already started
to
do?
Intentions.
Yeah, that's what it would. But that's hard to do. The rest of the world isn't really backing Netanyahu 100%, but I think he'll eventually gain the support as the people see. The Palestinians themselves are seeing that Hamas really hasn't done much for them. And the proof of that is that no other country wants them. They're supposed to be protecting the Palestinian cause and all that, but they're not taking them. And now they're supporting them indirectly, perhaps. That's how these tunnels got built and so forth. But it's a very complex scenario.
Which, and right to your point, is the tunnels itself being under hospitals or educational elementary schools, and there's this big outcry of all the Palestinians that are dying because of this war. But when you have Hamas building these tunnels purposely under places like hospitals and schools, there's going to be civilian casualties, unfortunately.
You don't hear this much, but the Geneva Convention doesn't seem to play into the Hamas side of the house. They just don't play like that. And really, you don't know until the next conflict is who will play by the game's rules. So
that's true.
This is war, and that's what happens. And as far as the protesters go, those who are protesting in favor of the Palestinians, of course, they have their beliefs. I'm not sure they're all well informed, but they at least believe what they're protesting for. And I might add that there's an incentive for them to do that. Somewhere, somehow, there's another actor involved that gives them the propaganda and gives them the reason to believe what they're acting on.
I agree with you. We've talked about that on our past podcast, and the fact, and going back to the Muslim Brotherhood, they have established themselves in the U.S. through different organizations, and a lot of the Middle East countries, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, have put billions of dollars into our universities, where a lot of the pro-Palestinian
pretty clever, isn't it?
protests are coming from. So
yeah, and this isn't new either. Adnan Khashoggi, I can remember he gave American University almost enough money to double in size in Washington, D.C., and that was in the 70s. So this type of influence, you want them giving money to colleges, or you want them to build bombs? I don't know. It's kind of a hard call.
Well, like you said, the influence. If they can get the influence there in the U.S., I guess maybe I was pretty surprised to see how much support we were getting for the pro-Palestinian side of things versus Israel. But when you look at the other factors involved.
Yeah, this is the brainwashing propaganda. The Confucian schools, they're starting to shut them down now, but they're here, and they're doing the same thing. They're doing the same exact thing. So it's a hard, once you get ideology penetrated, the rest comes easy because people grow up thinking that way, and that's what we have here. Now you have an open border, and I'm not sure they're all Latin Americans that are crossing that border.
I don't think so either.
No. And the fact that the administration takes pride in, we caught 28 guys today that, have records. Well, how many got through?
Yes.
So thousands maybe. So I'm not sure. You got a dangerous situation. I hate to predict what it might be, but the potential definitely is there for us to be conquered from within at this point.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot on our southern border. But getting back to Israel, they have a problem on their southern border, obviously. Do you think Hamas would ever be willing to negotiate with Israel?
Well, Hamas, negotiation is part of their ideology. It's not war is not the only resort. It's one of their last resorts. You could bring them to the table and negotiate. They'll even have elections to satisfy those of us who think that democracy is made of election. Whether the elections are valid or not, we don't know. But they will have elections, and that's looked favorably upon. And you can bring them to the negotiating table. However, usually the terms of coming to the table are very strict. Okay, and it usually involves a definite advantage to Hamas before they come to the table. But again, some negotiation is better than none, and we could see what happens. The ceasefire went pretty well this time, better than I expected it to be. There are only several infractions that I know of.
Speaking of negotiations, they were able to get hostages back. That is positive.
Mm-hmm.
How much do you believe Erdogan and Turkey played in that hostage?
Surprising to me that he hasn't claimed any position in that, but I know you could see that he's yielded to Qatar for all this. All of a sudden, you're not seeing Turkey's name and everything. You're seeing Qatar's name. Now, Qatar, back in about 2017, took a couple of hits from the rest of the Arab world because they were so influential with the Muslim Brotherhood and several other organizations that they were shunned. So now they need a little bit of a PR revival as well. And over the last few years, the only country that would bankroll Turkey really was Qatar. So you see a little bit of a nepotism situation going on there. But you're hearing Qatar where you used to hear Turkey when it came to these opportunities.
And we know Qatar is harboring Hamas leaders there as well.
Yeah, there's a whole cast of characters that reside there. So, and there's many that are in Turkey as well. So, I mean, that's not even a secret. But, who are we to say who can stay in your country or not? No. It's just whether, that's what's acceptable or not acceptable.
Well, thank you, Paris, for your thoughts. Any other closing thoughts you might have?
I really would encourage anyone to look into the history of Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood to find out the likenesses, the differences, the contrasts, and the deeds that they've pulled off. This is a different game than Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and the Taliban. It's a different kind of game. They don't play well together either. Everybody would think they're all buddies, but they're not. So,
Al-Qaeda and ISIS don't even play well together.
No, that's right. So you have to put this into the mix of how do you make peace around here? How do you get everybody happy? How do you to keep the guns from smoking? So you need to know history. You really have to check out the history, and then you'll find out what's laying in the minds of those people.
Thank you again for coming on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And to our listeners, you can subscribe to our newsletter to keep up with all of our podcasts and articles at www.ascf.us. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And you can also follow our podcast on Rumble and YouTube by typing in American Security Council Foundation. And join us again next time as we bring you the Peace Through Strength podcast.